Welcome back to Superhuman Customs. I'm Stephen Human, and today we've got another of my book characters that we're going to be doing. So remember a few weeks ago we did Sentinel from Paper Heroes. Today we're going to do Abbie-Moon Kinder from my newest book, Dreamforgers. This has been one of my most popular. She's an awesome character, and what I'm going to use as the base is this Batwoman Beyond character. Her head is perfect, but we're going to do some things that I haven't really done. We're going to remove the bat symbol here. We're going to patch it up. We're actually going to add a sword. This is an old Voltron sword that's pretty dinged up. That's going to be her weapon. This actually is fairly similar to how I pictured it in the book, except it's purple and it's kind of translucent. So this is what we're going to use as the base, and I'm going to have a lot of fun with this. I'm really excited just how Sentinel turned out. It's really, really cool to have these. So let's go ahead and turn her into a fully original character. First things first, before we do anything, we need to remove these wings. And the great thing is that they just pop right off. No big deal. So there we go. Let's soak her in water for a little bit and let's get this symbol off. She's been soaking for a little bit. She's nice and warm now, so this should be able to come off. Remember, these are just glued on. So if you can kind of get in underneath them, they can come off. Now I've got some pliers and I've got a razor blade. So let's see, not sure how long this is going to take or how much elbow grease this is going to require. Oh, that went right underneath it. So I'm just going to kind of push it around here. All right, I started pulling here from the bottom, and that's actually done the trick. That's pulling it off, so no need to cut. We're just going to rip it right off. All right, we were able to get most of it off. I think I can kind of cut the rest of it out, but there we go. Next thing, we're just going to take off these bat things on our arms. Little spiky, whatever they're called. Now we're going to use the same clay that we did for Doomsday, and I'm going to try and fill in here. Again, I thought about using a couple of different things, like fabric paint, like what I did with Purge, but I wanted to try something different with this one. So I'm going to fill it in. The great thing is that I should be able to sand this down, smooth it out, which I don't think I would really be able to do with the fabric paint. So I'm just going to fill this in and try and mush it around so that it forms the way that I want it to. And then we can see what happens. Again, experimentation. That's the fun part about all this stuff. We are experimenting. So the clay has dried. It feels really firm on there. So I'm just going to start sanding it down and see if I can match the edges here and getting it so that it's just a little bit more rounded out. I want it to match the plastic around it. And I think that this is going to look pretty good. So let's just sand it down, get it so that it's nice and soft. I'm actually going to take her head off. I think that's going to be a lot easier to sand on this. And let's just get it so that everything starts to smooth out and match. Everything feels pretty smooth. I'm never really good with sanding, honestly. It's really smooth around the edges. Up here, I'm not quite so sure. But I've sanded all of her, so she looks a little dusty, but she's actually been cleaned off. I've just sanded her so that once we do the spray paint, it'll stick a little better. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna go over with black so that we can have the same base color, like what we did with the Doomsday, where I went over those spikes in the gray so that they would match, and then the painting from there on matched. I want that same thing. I don't want to have any of this stand out on the final product, and so it needs to have a base coat that matches the rest of the body, which of course is black. So that is what we're doing right now. We're just going to add this black layer so that it matches, and then when we do the spray painting, it will all come out in the proper shade. You'll remember the primary reason I don't like this paint is because it does not come off the paintbrushes very easily. You have to use alcohol and stuff like that. So what I'm going to be using today, I'm going to be experimenting with fingernail polish because it does have sort of the same consistency. Now this is a beautiful paint when it goes on. As you can see, it's very shiny and gorgeous. And so it looks really nice. So I think this is going to be the right choice of not, waiting, not spray painting it and just using what I've got, because, I want to see her in her purple glory. So the base of Abbie is this dark purple, and then there's a lighter purple on the armor that she has. So we'll do that next. Let's just go ahead and start moving through. So with Abbie's hair, she has a dark brown hair. So I just want to add, so I'm just going to go through with a dry brush here and brown up her hair just a little bit. I still want it to be dark, so it's great that her hair is already black. But this way, we're able to just lighten it up just a smidge. That's all that I want. Now, one of Abbie's defining characteristics is the white line that goes down her forehead. So I'm going to try and be very steady in doing this. And it's going to be kind of hard, so let's... All right. That didn't turn out too bad. It might need a second coat, but it went on pretty straight. So, all right, not bad. Yeah, so you can see how the line goes down. It ends in the dot on her cheek. So now she's purple. The problem is that this paint, when it's on softer plastic, it's sticky. And like all here on her arms, all down here on her legs, it's all softer plastic because it's covering up the other stuff. So she is sticky in a lot of these places. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add now the lighter purple to some of the armor elements, and then we're going to spray her with a clear coat so that that can be done away with. Oh, as you can see, I replaced her hands. The holes for the hands were a little bit too big, so I put a little bit of putty in there, and they turned out looking pretty good. Yeah, a lot of this, she has a lot of softer plastic on her. And so it's just, this stuff just stays sticky. It never quite dries, it never quite sets. And so you've got to cover it with something else, and that is frustrating. I'm also going to take this opportunity to paint her sword. This is an old Voltron sword that I just had in my extras pack. And I'm going to have to spray this too because it is a softer plastic, so it's going to be sticky. So I might as well get it done too right now and then continue from there. Let's do it. Make sure this thing gets covered. Make sure all the sides. I don't want any sticky on here. All right. She's shiny, she's not sticky anymore. That's what I was after. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna move on to here. On the cover, she has some fabric on her that's red. She's actually purple in the book, and she doesn't have like necessarily fabric. She has armor that kind of appears over the top, but I can be vague. Obviously, I'm gonna be using this as a sales tool, this figure, when I'm at conventions and stuff. So I want her to look somewhat like the cover. So I've decided to use this purple. I think that it will contrast nicely against what I've got here. And I'm going to drape it around her just like I have on the cover. So we're going to need to cut this stuff up. That thing is sharp. That is awesome. And cut it out here. I want it to look kind of like that, but not quite so big. So I'm going to have to play around with this fabric a little bit to see how I can get it. I don't want it to... That's the problem with fabric on 6 or 7 inch figures, is that it always ends up being too thick. So let's play around with this a little bit. While I'm thinking about what I'm gonna do when it comes to the fabric around her, I'm gonna add some of these accents that you see in the cover. She just has a few white dots and lines on her arms and legs, and so I'm gonna add some of those just so that we've got some contrast. That's what I want. Right now she's very purple, even with a lighter purple. I want to add a little bit of contrast in some of these areas, just like I did on the cover. So I painted the blade that she's got, but her blade is actually see-through in the book. It's kind of like glass. Well, I found this. It's some blast from one of the Overwatch characters from Zarya that fits into her gigantic gun that I'm never going to use for anything. So what I'm going to try and do is cut this sucker into a smaller sword. I'm going to try and use this blade as a template as best I can to see if we can turn this into a sword that is a little bit more, you know, see-through about what I imagined. And I'm going to use some of these pieces maybe to add some armor before I do the, you know, the cloak and stuff like that. This is super fun trying to get this pole out for her to hold on to. So this did not turn out. The sword, I couldn't cut it, so it ended up looking really jagged. Not really what I wanted But it did allow me to have some of the clear armor that I wanted on her. So I just took a few pieces, laid it over some of the designs that I had done just to add some texture to her, and that turned out good. Now, what we have here is that my daughter, I took the purple fabric and my daughter sewed it, and I'm going to take this wire and we're going to put it in, and this is what's going to wrap around her for her shawl. So let's get moving on that, and she should be just about done. First things first, I want to twist the fabric because I want it to have a little bit more texture than just the sort of flatness. So I'm going to twist it. It'll thin it up a little bit. And the great thing about having a wire in here is that I can take it on the back and I can just kind of wrap it around. So there's no glue that needs to go on here. Originally I was thinking I was going to need to glue this in place. And now I can just take it, twist it like that, and it is going nowhere. And then with this last little bit here, I can kind of have it go like it's blowing in the wind or whatever, and just make it look cool. This one was a lot of fun, and I think she turned out looking pretty great. Just like with Sentinel last month, it's really fun to take characters that I've personally created from my books and be able to see them finished like this. I'm bummed that the clear sword, the see-through sword, didn't end up working out. That's a little bit of a bummer. But it did allow me to add some of these little armor pieces in different spots on her, which just add a little bit extra texture. And she does in the book have see-through armor that appears around her, this sort of light purplish. So that worked out pretty well. And the shawl, this looks really great too. And having the wire, I can kind of play with this and make it look like it's in the, in the wind or whatever, which is really great. And this also allows me to start thinking about making capes that, cloth capes that have wire edges to be able to be manipulated. So that's, I think, is my next sort of step in this. And this was a good way of experimenting and seeing how it would work. Luckily, I have a 15-year-old daughter that knows how to sew. And so she I think is going to be an asset in all of this. Well, that is Abbie Kinder, also known as Moon, from the book Dreamforgers. You can check out that book at stephenhuman.com. It is my newest novel. Abbie is awesome, one of my favorite characters I've ever created. This was a ton of fun. I'm Stephen Human. I'll see you next week.